My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you're here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and the grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Today, August 11th, we are celebrating the feast of Saint Clare of Assisi. She's not super famous, at least not as famous as the other saint that came from Assisi, St. Francis. But it's interesting to read about her life because she lived precisely during the same time as St. Francis. She was a few years younger and actually was precisely the example of St. Francis' conversion that moved her to dedicate her life to Jesus. Like Francis, she came from a very rich family, a noble family. She lived very comfortably. She had a beautiful castle or palace where she lived with her family. She had very good prospects of marrying very well. She could have lived a perfectly pleasant, comfortable, actually, we could say luxurious life. But she chose not to. Like Francis, she felt called by God and following the example of Francis, who had left all his privileges, abandoned his wealth, and moved out to live a radical monastic life that was marked by poverty, penance, and prayer. Claire, upon reaching her 18th birthday, decided to join this form of life and thought that she could found a feminine branch to Francis's monastic institution. And so, in secret, she decided to join. After having a conversation with Francis, she realized her family was not going to be happy. They had plans for her. She was supposed to marry this very rich man. And of course, her family did not want her to lead a life of poverty, even though they were good Catholics. They just didn't think that was a life worth living. And so, in secret, she joined that monastic life led by Francis and made her vows. And as a way of showing that dedication, which was traditional in that time, Francis cut her long hair and she put on that veil that reflects that dedication to God. Upon discovering Claire's decision, her family tried to convince her to return home. And they made her all kinds of promises of wealth and of all kinds of privileges of nobility. But Claire refused. And taking off her veil, she showed her short hair to her family. And that is when they realized Claire had made a vow to God. And they let her be. They let her dedicate her life to Jesus Christ. And I think this example is beautiful. Obviously, she's a great saint. But also because, in a way, she is putting into practice precisely what we read today in the gospel. This is what Jesus is telling his disciples. He says, "Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What profit would there be for one to gain the whole world and forfeit his life?" Jesus is telling that to his apostles, to his disciples. Whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. And that is what Francis and Clare did. They lost, I guess we could say, their privileges. They renounced their money, their inheritance, their comfort, the many possibilities they had in life. They gave them away, all to follow Jesus Christ. And they won so much. We could say, from a human perspective, we could say all these two saints went on to lead a very poor, sacrifice, terrible life, difficult, full of sacrifice and poverty and silence. But if we ask them, they will probably say, hey, I'm so happy I did that. And we see it in their lives. We keep reading about both Francis and Clare, we realize how happy they were. And actually, it's interesting because as you read the life of Clare, you realize that even though the beginning, her family had opposed this decision that she had made, very soon after, one of her sisters also decides to join her in this life of poverty and sacrifice, giving up also all her riches and privileges. And again, the family would oppose this. And later on, many years later, her own mother and another sister would join her in this life, realizing, probably because they realized how happy Clare was, how full of joy, what beautiful purpose there was in this life given to God. Something that their privileges, their riches could never give them. And this doesn't mean that you and I have to go out there, throw all our money out the window, and join a monastic life of poverty and sacrifice. Maybe some of you are called to do that. And if that is what God is asking you, then I encourage you to do it because you will be very happy. But what Jesus is telling all of us, independently of our circumstances, is that we need to really embrace his life, which doesn't necessarily mean that we need to sell everything and move out of our home and all that, but you can live this life dedicated to Christ in your home, in your work, making the money you make, but embracing Jesus Christ. Picking up your cross daily, the sacrifices that come with that work, with your family, helping those in need. Putting prayer in your life. You have to find that way in which God is calling you to follow him. But if you follow him, if you maybe give up some of those privileges, some of those comforts for the love of God, how much good will come from it? How much joy will God put in your life? You might be losing some of your life, some of your joy, or whatever it is that comes from all those riches and things. And how much more will you be gaining a life of grace filled with the love and the purpose that God gives to our lives? Hopefully, Claire's example can move you, just like it moved her sister and her mom, and so many other people. So many women followed Clare in her decision in her life. Let us also learn from her so that we can be moved to a conversion in our lives. Let us ask God for his grace, just like he gave it to Clare and Francis. Let us ask Mary, Mother, the first one to make that big decision, so that we can also imitate her and imitate these saints, denying ourselves, taking up the cross of Christ and following him. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations that you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask your help to put them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.